So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Youth Work Community of Practice. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Siavash. I'm the Director of Youth Affairs Network of Queensland, also known as YANC. Before getting any further, I should acknowledge that it's NAIDOC week, very special time, and also acknowledge that we're on Aboriginal land, all of us, of course, and I'm particularly in Mianjin, the Brisbane, so lands of the Turrbal Yagara people, and pay my respect to elders past and present, and also state my unwavering commitment to support our brothers and sisters in the struggle for justice and self-determination. I say this, and I guess it's a bit of a, subject of a discussion today. This has become a bit of a formality at every meeting. We acknowledge country and then state our respect for elders, and then we get on business as usual. So today we're hoping to do something a bit different, hoping to actually challenge this, what has become a bit of a tokenistic behavior. So challenging ourselves, challenging in a safe way, in a way that we can grow both individually and hopefully help grow our society. And I guess it's about exploring how we can really breathe air and breathe life and meaning and some form of a commitment to this acknowledgement, so that, like, when we actually say it, we really mean it. So then in all our deliberation, in everything that we do, we actually embody that. So it's about that embodiment. It's about, I guess, with a particular focus, I guess, for us is about, well, what does this mean in terms of supporting the Murri young people that we work with, and also both at our workplaces and also in our private life. So we hope to explore, I guess, how we can walk beside them and support them in their struggle for justice, and not so much, I guess, support them in a welfare context. So it's not about a passive one. It's about exploring that we have a unique opportunity here to learn, if we really understand that it's a really unique opportunity to learn from this ancient culture. And I guess, in my view, that's going to be our only savior of us from us, like, savior of humans from the worst of humans, and as humans, as a species, and also our environment on this planet, as we know. If we are to survive, in my view, that's the only learning that's going to help us. So to help us, I guess, with today, we have a very special guest, Ruby Wharton, who is a proud Gomeroi Kuma woman with a passion for advocating for First Nation sovereignty, justice, and truth-telling. Ruby is a community organizer. Many of you would know her. She's actively contributed to numerous campaigns, and currently also works at Sisters Inside as a community development officer, and also leads the Sisters Inside's End Toxic Prisons initiative across Queensland. A big campaign there, advocating for, I guess, creating safer communities for children and young people, instead of putting them in prisons. I was telling Ruby that I haven't had the privilege of meeting her before, but it feels like I have met her, because for so many years I've actually heard her speak at various forums and protests, and from when she was actually very young. So she's a true young activist that has grown up, and it's been fascinating watching this warrior. And she comes from a family of warriors, so I also know her dad, that he's also an amazing man, amazing campaigner. And so very excited to hear Ruby. Unfortunately, Neteri, Mabo, and Phil Dodds, who were also going to speak today, Phil is very sick and something urgent has come up for Neteri, so they both send their apology. But helping me today, as she has been with these communities of practice, is Jen Geigen, who is a long member of the youth sector. Many of you would know her, either from the youth sector, her work there, or from lecturing youth work at QUT. So she will help me with this. So what we'll do is we'll start by hearing from Ruby, her overall thought on the issue. Then Jen and I might throw in a few questions, and then we'll open it up for rest of you having a question, so everybody will get a chance to interact with Ruby and ask any questions or clarification. And then we'll have a short break. And then after the break, we're going to come back and collectively try to explore what has been the learning from the discussion this morning, and how can we turn that learning, take it away and integrate it in our daily work and in our daily life. So we go out of this session with something tangible that we can actually do. So hope that sounds okay. And so without further ado, I please welcome Ruby.
Good morning, good morning. Thank you, Mob, for being here in this. It's really cold here in Mugginjim this morning. Marty don't like this cold. But before I go on, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that I'm on today, the Yagara and Turrbal peoples, and most importantly, acknowledge the kinship systems that they have upheld here in this place and in this colony, and most importantly, the pillars in which they've created for us mob to be able to stand on and continue to fight and advocate for our people. I'm the community development officer here at Sisters Inside. I've been in this role for about 2 years, and I do a little bit of everything. If you hear a phone in the background, that's just me being a very terrible receptionist covering for a good friend. And but just on the, I guess what I do here at Sisters primarily is work with young people. I run and facilitate the Work Pathways program, which is a program that's designed to get people trained, skilled and employed and confident enough to seek personal development, whatever that may be, whether it be finishing off their secondary schooling, being curious about vocation and further training and university or other further studies, and pretty much just give them a taste of the world so they can decide what they feel that they want to do with what they think their purpose is. I also am the lead campaigner for the End Toxic Prisons campaign, which was Sisters Inside's response to Queensland Government's initiative to develop, at the beginning, was 2 prisons for children, but now we know that it is 3 prisons for children located down here on Jinnaburra country, on Yidinji country up in Gimoy and Camp, and on Yagara country. They're going to be building another prison for children out there. So all of my work really focuses on the advancement of young people and just securing them in society, that they have a place and that we as a society can respond to these young people in better ways. And we should be resourcing communities to be safer, as opposed to incarcerating young people and denying them advancement, denying them education, denying them skills and just an ability to sustain themselves in an independent capacity. Normally I'd be here with Phil and Murri, and they're extremely big mentors for me in this space. I'm a very big baby in the social sector. I've been a community development, a community organizer and protester for many, many years. But in terms of translating all of that advocacy into a professional context, I really rely on Murri and Phil in particular. They've both been in this space for over close to 2 decades, Phil more than. And they teach me a lot about being human. But most importantly, one big foundation for our practice here at Sisters Inside is our values and mission statement, which is our pink print, for want of a better phrase, to how we practice and work alongside women, girls and their families and communities by extension. I think I'm rambling a little bit now, but I think I'll just drop it here in the chat so you guys can have a read of it. It's the link to our values and mission statement, and it is God sent when we work alongside women and girls, and it really questions the practice of a social worker and the need for a social worker and how we can best be a part of a young person's life or a woman's life or their family's lives, and actually provide a sense of stability and a sense of secure attachment that they think and they feel has enabled them confidently to pursue whatever it is that they need to pursue in life. And in the case of Sisters Inside and the women and girls we support here, that's freedom, independence, and happiness. But yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks, Ruby, for that. I guess you've been around for a long time, and from, I guess, being a young person yourself in that space, and so I guess how do you see the interaction of youth workers generally with Murri young people, and how do you see that? Is it connected, disconnected? Do you see that there's awareness of what's going on?
I see a massive disconnection and massive lack of awareness when working with young Murri kids in particularly. But I think it also extends to culturally diverse backgrounds and other people. It's not just a Murri exclusive thing. I've found that a lot of people will police a young person's family dynamics as well as the young person themselves. Just speaking with another person here at Sisters Inside yesterday, they had to make a position of advocacy because a child was was going to be charged with a breach of bail, and that was because they weren't at their bail address. However, they had a condition that they had to be residing with a family member. It didn't specify which family member, but this child had been breached because she went to her auntie's house. She was bailed to Nan's, but went to auntie's because it was Nan's off pay week and she didn't have enough food, and auntie had enough food. And it was just by coincidence that this young person was breached and charged and is now consequently arrested. We see this quite often, that a young person will find themselves in these predicaments, and it's because police and courts and other youth workers in the space or whoever supports them don't understand the family dynamics at play, and children often end up being a burden and being charged with being a burden. And that's a really unfair repercussion for that young person to face, because it's just something that is completely in their disinterest, and safety, and risks their lives, essentially. We see this across the board too. Like, I find it really lovely to be able to be a part of this legal space that we have here at Sisters Inside. And it's really peculiar to see social workers and residential care workers who call the police on young people, expecting to be able to be in the middle of a conference with that young person and their solicitor. It's really, really unfair that the person who calls the police can also be the confidant and in a legal, confidential, closed conference with a solicitor. Those are just things that don't make sense. But these are these demonstrations of power that we see adults walking, who are meant to walk alongside the young people. They embody this and they further police that young person, and there's absolutely no resolve, and the child just remains in a cycle. And this is a laundry and a washing machine of a system, not the young person's immediate life and circumstances. So those are the kinds of things that we see here. They're really quite random and weird, but they're real life things for these young children and they have no ability to advocate for themselves in those contexts.
Yeah. So, Ruby, I've heard you speak previously about decolonizing, and I guess what you're talking about, it's like, it's in a way we're talking about some parts of the mainstream youth work siding with colonizers. So how can we change that around? And so what would be the process for youth workers to join the anti-colonial struggle, I guess?
Well, we say check our privilege at the door, and I guess that goes for everybody of every creed in this space. I want to reflect back on the Sisters Inside values and mission statement. Although it was written over 2 decades ago by incarcerated women, it really has this massive element of decolonial strategy and tactics heavily involved and sprinkled across each element of our lives. And I guess it starts with our section and our position on reform. And we talk about social reform and legal reforms and how these are the massive pillars that prevent any kind of decolonization to occur. So these are things that we must be very conscious about in our practice. And I guess we must understand who these reforms benefit. And Sisters Inside is a staunch, proud advocate of abolition, and we are very big believers of abolition and its ability to create safe communities. Abolition, I find, is a massive decolonial strategy and is something that we should be implementing into our day-to-day practice as youth workers and support peoples in this space. If we come from a position of abolition, we are forced to remove ourselves from the frame. And we're forced to consider that young person only, and all of the elements of their lives and it becomes it's massive cultural competency in this practice. It forces you to protect that young person, and it forces you to check your privilege at the door. There are really great resources, especially with the National Network of Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. They've been doing a lot of advocacy around the NDIS space, and recently just returned from Canberra and have done, for the little time that they've been involved as a collective, they've introduced a lot of really great techniques and vernacular and vocabulary around how we can best advocate and remind ourselves to check our privilege. And we must be conscious that we have to walk alongside these young people, not hold that position of power. And I guess that's the first way that we decolonize our practice.
I guess a question, that maybe others in the room are kind of, rattling around with is like, that sounds good in an organization. Like, yes, I love that. I have those values. This is really important, and in an organization that has such an incredibly good values and mission statement, like we've used Sisters Inside's mission statement as an example of, how something, how a practice should be guided, and so it kind of makes it more doable. And so how can it be doable in an organisation where there's blocks and barriers and policies and procedures and, all of that stuff that really reflects colonial practice and a power over practice, which is probably where lots of people are actually working. And so how do they implement an abolitionist practice or decolonizing practice in those spaces where it's hard? And it's even more important that they do that in those spaces. No,
massive question. And I guess on a organized, like on an entire organization perspective, it will be very, very difficult. But the only thing that you can be is a consistent worker who shows up every day and succeeds in their abilities to be there for a person, and actually sets an individual standard that can maybe an individual standard that produces really great outcomes and relationships between the worker and the young person. Then they are able to kind of influence the rest of their colleagues to provide that same level of support, because they're seeing how successful that they can be when they walk with power with that young person, as opposed to dictating that young person's lives and what they can and cannot do. And the only way that we can do that is by exhausting all avenues, and it's at risk of burnout. So it's something that you naturally have to, if you're at risk of burnout, it's something that's naturally can trickle down or trickle upwards to management and infiltrate in that way. If a collective of workers on a whole are having really great outcomes, but the burnout is evident, I would expect as a worker in an organization, no matter how big the structure is, that I'm being supported to provide the support to whatever young person. It's a lot simpler than it sounds, but it's a massive road that you have to slug, but it's a road that's worthwhile. And I guess from a position of where the younger youth team members here work within, is that they have to get rid of 25-year-old people now that just refuse to let go of our team, because the workers in the younger team are just amazing that maintain relationships and humanness. And I guess once we meet the needs of that individual, and that's how we best show up, is we let that individual advocate the worst things to us. Whatever, if it's them having a couch surf, it's them going through other confidential elements of life, it's us meeting their needs. And once we meet their needs, we build that confidence and that relationship and a secure attachment. And then we are best able to pursue whatever greatness in personal self-development that young person has the potential to excel in. For me, it just sounds really, really simple as that. And I know in this context, it's going to need and require a lot of work, but it's something that young people need. They need somebody who is consistent in their life. And if we can be that, and we will initially evidently see a really positive growth, and hopefully management in an organization would want to support its workers pursuing that across the board as an organization.
So, Ruby, you talk about those meeting the needs of young people. I'm interested also to know sort of, how do you, your perception of those young people, whether you do see them as potential co-activists and also engage with them about those conversations. So we're talking about the decolonization now of that level with them as well.
No, most definitely. I just think of one young person in particular in the Younger program. She comes from a very strong family, and a family with a long influence in this space. And I recall one night, it was a Black Lives Matter protest in the middle of King George Square in the city here in Brisbane. And she had given an amazing speech, and the speech was ended with her being cuffed by 3 officers. And it was quite a moment to witness, but also just how that young person held her ground, held her head, held everything in life. And just hold on one moment. Sorry, I just had somebody come into the office here. So it's important that this young person, what she needed in that individual moment, she can advocate. She's got a mouth on it. She's a very strong person and is very culturally in tune with her world and her surroundings. It's what she needed from me in that moment, though. I wasn't a Sisters Inside worker. I was the community organizer. We simply followed along with her to the police, explained who I was, and she was evidently released to my custody so I could take her home to her bail address, which was, it's quite humbling to be able to support a young person in that way, in that space, and her still, because I asked her to jump on that microphone. That was me, and that was maybe a poor thing for me to do in that moment. However, that young person still had that level of confidence that she can walk in to any space, have a voice, draw attention, have people like police officers listen to her talk about Black Lives Matter and how we need to end deaths in custody in our community, in our world. And then for her to be arrested, and then she's like, nah, I'm right, my auntie's got me, or my community's got me, my mob's got me. Yeah, that really solidifies the importance. And I think it's important that, and this is something we can take into our practice when we have young people who are going to youth justice conferences or going into court. We should give them that ability to speak, and we should encourage them to speak on their experiences, because unfortunately, a lot of what these children experience on a day-to-day basis is something a lot of adults in this world to be a fallacy and a misconception and crying wolf and just banging the drums and playing the violins. That's something that we need to end, and we need to hear young people being advocates, and we need to support them advocating for themselves, especially if a professional is advocating in that way. It draws a lot of importance. It forces other people to listen and other adults to listen to this young person, and most importantly, validates that young person's experience.
So another question I have, and I know it's sort of like, it's a bit controversial to mention the R name and the racism, I guess, and it's two-pronged, this question. It's about the prevalence of racism in our society. And so on one hand is the impact on young people in terms of being over-policed, over-arrested. As we know, the detention centers, prisons are full of Murri kids. And as you said, this young person who's speaking at a protest getting arrested, that kind of thing. So that's from that end of it. But so that's one question, is about the impact of systemic racism at that level. But I'm also interested to hear your view about whether that growing up in a racist society, it somehow has impacted us in a way that you mentioned before. There's that disconnect, and this disconnect not just as workers, but as individuals, in terms of how many of us, as youth workers, know the kids that are actually ending up in youth detention center, have worked with them in that, or how many of us do, hang out with Murri families and invite them, have meals and stuff like that. So yeah, so from that sort of a personal level to systemic, do you think that there is an issue that we got to talk about that is racism?
Yeah, but most definitely. I live in a bit of an echo chamber though. My world's pretty perfect. I have a little community, and they really encourage me, Black, White, and Brindle, and we love on each other in a really fierce way. And I guess my echo chamber is the definition and what I refer to constantly when we talk about safe communities and how we build safe communities. I'm somebody who relies on my little world very, very heavily. I support somebody in my sibling is in constantly incarcerated. He lives alongside a really difficult mental health disorder, and battles a lot of different demons. And being able to support him in a day-to-day life is me, like, it looks like me falling back on my echo chamber, and I wouldn't be anything without them. And I guess it's taken a lot of brave allies who have met me along the way and have just understood that pain and that heartache and the determination to feel joy. And they know that in their individual personal capacity, they can help facilitate joy. And that's just everything in this space and in this world for a First Nations person and other culturally diverse people as well. And I massively see that that lack of interaction trickle into a systemic world, where people are genuinely scared to interact with blackfellas. And I can totally understand that, especially if the ally is coming along to a protest for the first time and they're hearing people like myself and my father and everybody else saying a lot of uncanny phrases and dropping C-bombs left, right, and center. I can see how a lot of people can have anticipation towards engaging with First Nations people, especially fierce advocates, because it's hard to match that energy. But I've found that over the years, meeting a lot of deadly allies and people who have become family over time, they've just have given that space, and it's important that an ally or a non-First Nations person or a person who's not of colour, it's just important to be able to remove yourself from, as an individual, much like how that person of colour is doing in that moment. We have to remove ourselves as individuals from the machinery of racism, from the machinery of colonial practice. It's about us having that fierce determination to love on each other and facilitate joy for each other that actually produces really great work within the space and builds really strong foundations for relationships. And it will benefit us in a workspace environment, because we won't be very apathetic, I guess, or not prepared when engaging with different First Nations people. And that's really important depending on what location you're in, especially in so-called Queensland. The First Nations community up here is extremely diverse. There are about 25 different types of accents you'll come across. Many different peoples and communities have many different values, and a lot of uniqueness to their communities that we'll have to learn to understand. And I think off the top of my head, I could refer to a community like Arakoon, which has been given a lot of really negative flack across the last 30 odd years, and are a community that still constantly experiences really weird policing. They're a community that has no infrastructure. They heavily rely on government workers to fly in, fly out. It's not very resourced. A lot of the children end up in youth prisons. And Cleveland prison for children in Townsville is often overcrowded. So these children are coming from remote communities into prisons down here in Southeast Queensland, and we're interacting with them and understanding that there's so much uniqueness, and the things that they experience are not necessarily things that Murri kids down here experience. So it's important to have that consciousness, but also be aware of unconscious bias when engaging with with the multitude of different communities. It's really easy, even for mob, to have preconceived notions around certain communities, and it's important that we kill the police or kill the copper or kill the security guard, kill the person with the power in your head. And that is the best way to practice with young people. And and just First Nations people in general.
Thank you.
Should we open up to questions from the group? Do you think, Sebash, is it
Sure.
a good time to do that?
Sure.
Ruby, you happy to
Yeah.
take questions? I know that there's some people from the regions here, and you know that could be interesting to hear some of the perspective from regions as well as more urban places. Yeah. Anyone got any questions? Be brave.
Yeah. Oh, was I meant to put my hand up?
No.
Like a digital
Go ahead,
hand?
go ahead.
No.
I guess I had a question, probably, but it's for Ruby and for Jen. But yeah, I was super interested when you said like we work in organizations that maybe are not abolitionists, which I think is really true, right? But having, you know, the privilege of working alongside Ruby for many years, like I think that the way that you practice abolition, Ruby, is like in every day, right? So it's like in every relationship you build, like how you show up for people, but then also like how you trust people. Because it's easy to say like you're an abolitionist, but it's hard to like then trust someone when, you know, things are really hard, right? But what I'm thinking, and so I'm rambling too, but what I think is like my question is, there's stuff that we can all do, whether it's like going out and getting assist training as youth workers. So, you know, when someone has like a mental health crisis, instead of calling like the police, you can call on someone who's assist trained, or like, you know, everyone who comes out of care and turns 18, they've got to go on public guardian. So then all of a sudden, like our young kids here at Open Doors, when they have a case conference meeting, their public guardian, who's meant to only know limited information about their finances, all of a sudden knows their hormone levels, you know, and like, or, you know, knows what they were doing last night. And I like the point I'm trying to make is that I think like we can advocate every day and believe young people every day. And like, I guess I'm interested to know maybe more how you do that, Ruby. But then also, I guess my question to you, Jen, is like, I think from uni, there's this kind of push that it's like, it's either all the organization's fault or like sometimes it's just like individual and it's on us, when I think it's like always a mixture of the two, right? It's like
Absolutely.
it's always believing the young people and always pushing back on the organization, but then like working together. So I don't even know if that's really a question by the end of it, but I don't know. You just both got me kind of like thinking.
I think everybody's heard enough from me. If Jen wanted to first.
I guess it's uni stuff. Sometimes it's kind of feels black and white and siloed, you know. It's like there's a right way and a wrong way, and we're teaching the right way, you know, and if you don't do it our way, well, then you're a, you know, hopeless youth worker, whatever, you know. And it is far more complex than that when you get out into the world of youth work, you know. And I do think that it's about that push and pull between what you can do in the context that you're working in and how you can push that context further. I don't think that there's an inherent all organizations are bad and all critical workers are good, because, you know, like, you know, that's just a real false, you know, binary, isn't it? Yeah. So I think that we can't change anything unless we bring our organizations along with us. And some organizations are going to really struggle against that, which is going to make our work hard. And, you know, you're talking about burnout, you know, and that burnout feeling, you know, comes more often from bashing your head against managers and policies that go against your values. Because you leave uni and you have these values and you have this education, you go, I'm going to be the best critical social worker, youth worker, whatever that I possibly can be, because I believe in all of that. And you get out there and you go, fuck, it's hard. Like, it's never endingly hard. And when we're starting to feel burnt out, you know, that I struggle with that kind of language. It's like we're, you know, have batteries that expire, you know, but when we, you know, when we're starting to feel that kind of real tiredness, you know, it's easier to fall back on the policies and the rules and the not push back stuff. And I think we need to forgive ourselves when we do that. It doesn't mean that we're going against everything. It just means that for now we're tired. And this battle was hard in that moment, and we need to go back to our people, the people who lift us up, and regroup and go back in and go again. Because one thing that I've learned in the decades that I've been working with young people is that young people deserve youth workers who can stay in the fight, you know, who are willing to keep fighting regardless, you know, and just stay in that fight. Ruby, what you were saying before about just that, you know, that hanging in, being the person that hangs in, you know, like I remember when I worked at BYS, and BYS is another one of those organisations where people fake their, you know, birth certificate at 25 so they can stay there, you know, like that kind of, or certainly when I was around there, you know, I haven't had much contact with BYS over the last recent years, but BYS was often the most stable thing in their life, more stable than family, more stable than friends, more stable than school, more stable than anything. It was that organisation. And so therefore that organisation has to do it right. You know, has to be there for them, and be that like deserve to have that person put their faith in that organisation. They've got to earn that. You know, we don't have that as a right just because we exist as an organisation. We have to earn it every day from those young people, that they want to turn up to us and they want to put their faith in us. And as youth workers, we have to constantly be held to account for that. It's a really long answer, and probably went all over the place, but that's just kind of captures a few of the things that I've been thinking of while Ruby's been talking, but also in response to that question. So it is far more complex than all of that. But young people have to have youth workers who are there, you know, have to have youth workers who are there for a long time. You know, youth work's often seen as something that you do for a few years and then you kind of, you know, grow up and move on, you know. It's and we need youth workers who are old, you know, who have history, who've been around all the cycles that government policy fucking drags people through, who have heard all the stories over and over and over and over again, and who can call out bullshit when they see it, because they know, because they've been there before. And young people deserve those workers as well. Yeah. Yeah. Your turn, Rube.
That's a perfect response. And it's just having to persevere within those spaces, and especially like with an office like a public guardian and public trustee, they're really, they make a woman or a young person feel uncomfortable, and they make any workers that have to engage with them uncomfortable. It feels like you can never really trust or confide in them, or even resort to them as a solution. Like a lot of people in prison, adult women in prison who are under public guardianship and trustees, don't even like engaging with their trustee to transfer their money into their buy-up account, even if they do have money available. And that's a really peculiar thing to actually see a woman try to navigate through those kinds of barriers. And I guess the one thing that we can do in those spaces as professionals is encourage other professionals to question their own practice, and encourage the person that we're supporting to question that practice. And that starts by asking the question, how does it make you feel to have to engage with this? What's your concerns, and what kind of things can I, as a support worker who supports you engaging with a guardianship, to best inform that guardian what you need and what you expect of them? because it's important for a young person and just anybody to have an expectation of what a service is that they can do for you. And once that person has that expectation and understanding of what these things and places can and cannot do, you begin to witness a young person grow to be a very, very savvy adult who just fiercely advocates. And there's a couple of people that Nico and I have supported in the past who I can think at the top of my head who these young people who turned into boss-ass women are. And just to see where these women are at now, for like 5 years ago, they were still being rat bags, but now they're just the staunchest, most powerful, liberated, free women. And to see them have to endure that and come out the other side even more fierce and more powerful than they ever were locked in chains is quite a thing. So I guess we just have to be willing to persevere and be willing to ask the questions and bring that humaneness to something that sucks dry any kind of empathy. And we as support workers in the social sector must be persevering in our work to ensure that there's no need for a public guardian, or there's no need for us in 10 years' time. Ideally, yeah, we want to grow old so that every young person gets a dose of that wisdom and that love and that support. But ideally, it'd be even better if everybody can grow up in a safe community, in a safe world where they have that ability to be advocates and be listened to and respected. Because like Siavash begun with, we all have a lived experience that we can bring into this moment. And if we can remember to question and care, then I think that's our job well done.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? Sophie, please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm just turning my camera on, so I'm human. I guess mine's not really a question, it's more of a reflection. So I work at Marta Clarence Street in the Extend program, and I really resonated with the conversations about being in a larger organisation. And as a hospital, there is a lot of, it's built on colonial load, and coming in as a new program under the Extend, where I feel like we really do that everyday decolonisation by just constantly walking alongside young people, being out in community, and kind of stripping away that idea of traditional clinical drug and alcohol support. But of course, we're only a team of 4, and trying to go against, this big organisation, definitely gets tough. But you just really made me think about making sure I always rely on my people, because we're all here kind of for the same reason, which is we really want to support young people to the best of our ability. So hopefully we can start making strides around that.
No, and that must be a really tough position to be in day out. I couldn't imagine the burnout that you experience. Like, I experience it just alone with my own family members. But I think with the health sector in particular, like AOD with young people, there's absolutely nothing for these young people, and in more a dire state, we forget that we grow. We forget that these young people grow to be adults that still have the same problems that 14-year-old or 12-year-old kid had. And one thing that we see is that we have to be that health response as somebody who doesn't work within the AOD space specifically. We are the health response to children who have been denied everything, every bit of care. These are kids that are in resi care. These are children that have parents who have, it's all this classism starts to come about. I can think of, there's a couple little rat bags who come from very good homes, and I use massive bunny ears because it's always the parents that say they come from a great home. And yes, they might come from a great home, but there's nothing for you as a father or you as a mother to actually go and engage with, so that you are being the best parent who is supporting your baby to access every kind of bit of care that they have. And it becomes that reflection, and we have to remember to kill the copper inside our head, stop policing our parenting, stop policing how our children behave, and actually question the resources that we have. And if health workers in an AOD space, specifically who work with young people and children, in Queensland we have this massive problem with inhalation of substances, and it's something that I've communicated with mob and workers down in Victoria, and they have a complete different pandemic with children using IV related substance use, as opposed to like and it's just interesting to see the comparativeness of what these young people have to experience and endure. However, ultimately they come back to being the same person. And if we can, as workers, learn to resource each other, because we're not going to be able to get these resources from the actual institution of the whatever respective state we're in with their health services. We're never going to get that. It relies on social workers in separate organizations who are able to resource each other within our own offices. And that's something that I find funny that isn't more of a conversation in these spaces, because I think we all know that health are the biggest barriers, and health workers are very good in their professionalism and are able to maintain, this is my lane, you go and speak to this other person if that's a lane, in this other lane. And these young people who experience AOD grow to be adults who get charged with dirty needles, who get charged with crimes on their body, and then are incarcerated and denied access to society. And at a further detriment, their health just deteriorates and dissolves to nothingness. I think us as support workers in this space with young people who do experience substance mistreatment and addiction, we have to be super conscious of how we can work alongside other social workers in these spaces to provide wraparound intensive care. Because if that child doesn't become cared for in the ways that they need to, they turn into adults who harm people and that other adults are scared of. And that's, yeah, I don't know, I rambled there. Sorry, I hope you got something from it.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, hi guys. I really love the content that's been brought up here today. I just, it's really made me sort of reflect on our community out here in Moranbah, being a rural community, and how I'm supporting our youth out here. So one of the things that comes up quite often for us is our youth are generally coming from different areas. So it might be from Townsville, Rocky, Brizzy. And what I'm sort of seeing in this space at the moment is just the different values and the different expectations on these young people and the way they should behave and they should act based on their family. And their families can be from different areas, so they have very different views. It can be quite challenging sometimes navigating how to best advocate and support for the youth within that. Yeah, it's just one of my reflections I'm having at the moment.
No, I could imagine that's a constant reflection. Like every day you walk into work, how do I talk to this family? How do I talk to that one?
Yeah.
Then it's going to ground me next.
Yep.
No, it's very much that. And unfortunately, there isn't a clear way. And the only clear way that we can do that is building really good, strong relationships with those young people and the family, and just showing that we'll be something consistent in their life. And you know, it gets the oldest of grumpiest old ladies to change their tune and get along. And I've seen that here at Sisters. It's really beautiful. We've been able to support families for some 7 generations, and it's really lovely to see that really deadly trust that they have, and it's a really rewarding feeling. So hopefully you get to feel that one day in that role.
Well, I really love that the way that you've held space for youth, the way that you keep bringing that in, holding space, facilitating joy, really loving on the youth. Like, that's sort of my approach with any youth that walks through our door. And you do get to see those moments where these youth are having such great success in their own personal achievements, and they're coming out of youth justice, they're having those successes. And it is really nice to walk alongside that. But yeah, just seeing those dynamics and those differences within communities and how they interact and how the conversations are flowing and how confusing that can be sometimes for the youth.
Yeah, most definitely. I think the one thing in the Work Pathways program that I always try to break the ceiling by I want to say fueling them to be delusional. I want them to be delusional when they come to me. I want them to be fiercely ambitious, and I want them to never be hindered by this overwhelming sense of hopelessness. I think we can all agree that when we meet a young person, the immediate diagnosis that we get is hopeless. That these young children can't even envision themselves happy, let alone old and employed or doing whatever it is they want to do. Because employment and education isn't always a great thing for young people, but we have to be able to facilitate that joy and kill that hopelessness. I'm a really big fan of Dr. Chelsea Watego, and she has a chapter in one of her books, Another Day in the Colony, Fuck Hope. And we have to stop putting hope into these young people. We actually have to stop doing that, because they don't know how to be hopeful. They have been told time and time again, and their lives and their day-to-day lives, it solidifies that hopelessness. But the one thing you'll never stop a little black kid from doing is finding joy and laughing. And that's what they do with their community and their mates. That's the best thing I love about Work Pathways, is telling them to be quiet because they're making some joke about the learning content they got in front of them, and they're all gas bagging for 15 minutes. And they're here to find hope, but the first thing they get distracted by is whatever piece of joy they experience. And that's something that us as workers must facilitate in order for these kids to grow up to be hopeful adults, because it's not fuck hope entirely. You can stoke that fire so they become hopeful and ideally delusional and fierce with their aspirations. If you create a delusional black kid from a remote community can do a lot of great things, a lot of great things. And it's a really big honor to be that adult who encourages them to be that delusional little kid.
That's beautiful.
Well, the one thing I've experienced with the Work Pathways program is advocating with the trainers, because I'm not the RTO. The RTO provides a trainer, and those trainers often they would hear the conversations I'd have with these young people around, like, you're going to get your grade 11 and 12 certificate out of this course, and then we can think about university, we could think about other vocation and training. And the trainers always say, you don't need to be saying university. You don't need to be doing that. And the moment the young person hears a deficit, they're always going to look for that deficit in their life, and they'll flock to it like a moth to a flame. And we have to be the ones that want to flick the lights on in all different places, so that a young person can experience all different types of conversations and abilities. And we have to encourage a young person to never be fearful of failure, because especially the young people that we work alongside, they're going to experience failure. They're going to be caught, have doors slammed on them. They're going to be run down. They're going to be ridiculed. They're going to constantly have to overcome barriers. And we have to encourage that young person and never lose that flame, and never dull that fire that they have inside them, because it's the only thing that will get us through it. It's the only thing. So encourage delusion, facilitate it, facilitate joy, and just be that person.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ruby,
I remember years ago working in the youth shelter in Darwin, and they had an employment worker there who was incredible at facilitating delusional thinking by young people. Didn't call it that, but I love the way you framed that. But I remember one young person who just popped into my head while you were talking then, and hadn't been through school, long background of stuff, but the worker, like, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to be a marine biologist. And I was like, all right then, well, let's start that, and managed to get them volunteer work at a dive shop in exchange for diving lessons, and that was the beginning. They were in the water, they were doing it, and and it's exactly that. It can be encourage that delusional thinking with real practical steps, so that the young person can go, yeah, they believe in me, and I can believe in myself because I'm doing this bit of it. And this bit's on the way to that bit over there, and I'm doing it. Yeah.
No, most definitely. And I think in the role of work pathways, it's really exciting. A lot of the women and girls do come out of an institution with the ability to work a barista coffee machine. So everybody always get hospitality jobs shoved in their face, and because that's the only thing people without an education or experience can do is hospo, and it's really unfortunate. But when the young, we're really we've been funded for actual employment worker here at Sisters, so it's really awesome that the women and girls here have a pathway from the Work Pathways program into employment, and not one of them have gone into hospitality. There's been over 10 people that have employed. One's gone back to uni. She's working in the Inland Rail. She's cleaning up. She's doing a lot of really great things. And another one's about to get their HR license, and they're going up to Murri to work in the mines, which is really awesome. And it's just great. I saw one of the women the other week, and she rocked up in her work pants, her big work boots, and her high-vis shirt. And I've never seen a more boss woman in her power. And it's really deadly to be able to see them thrive and persevere through life to actually get to that stage. And it's really great because this one young woman, she always said, I wanted to work in the mines and I wanted to get my license. And this is a young person who had recently, at the start of the year, been charged and sentenced with disqualified license and driving. She's got her red peas back and is on her way to work HR in the mines. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? It's unreal. And it's great to be able to witness her become that really stable person. And she's a single mother to a 7-year-old girl. So it's really great to be able to see her provide not only for her family, but boost her confidence. And everybody said she couldn't do it. Everybody. And she's the most cockiest woman now. You can't tell her nothing. And rightfully so. Rightfully so.
So, Ruby, I guess what comes to my mind is that there are individual stories of success that, like you're referring to, but when we look at the overall statistics, there are more children now being stolen by the government. There are more children who are homeless. There are more Murri kids in youth detention center than ever. More Murri kids getting kicked out of school. And so there is this sort of marketing thing about closing the gap and that sort of a thing. But all indicators, we seem to have been going back. And I guess my question is, how much of the focus should we be putting into trying to get people to fit into a broken system, and how much on focus should we be giving the support for system change, that sort of self-determination, that sort of doing things significantly different?
Well, I touched on towards the beginning of a young person and a colleague here at Sisters having to advocate for the family dynamics around her breach of bail, and this young person had that charge pulled, and that was only that's a very new offence in the youth justice legislation here in Queensland. That was something that that was my second parliamentary inquiry I've ever sat on in terms of representing sisters inside, which is just, it's incredible that I've been able to do that, but it's really stupid that we had to do that. So after the announcement that Palaszczuk's government was going to be hell-bent on developing 3 prisons for children and committed over many billions of dollars towards this initiative, they started making all the legislative changes that they needed to in order to fill these prisons, which is just, that's the position of Sisters Inside. We're all big skeptics of prisons and policing, and we believe that they're the last resort to creating safer communities. However, this parliamentary inquiry around the changing youth bail legislation, it was never an offence until this year. And basically it provided the police powers to, Deb Kilroy says police must have crystal balls because they're able to predict that a child is just going to be at risk of breaching a bail. And for many children, they are technically, in a black and white world, they are risking that breach and are incurring a new charge and are at risk of incarceration. However, and this is how decolonising and abolition come into play in our individual practice, is that we must be fiercely conscious of our young people and the lives that they live. And we must be able to be there when they are going for bail orders and identifying the problems within those bail orders. And we must consistently be there in that room and be there by that young person's side to ensure that these kinds of things don't get exasperated, because they are massive blind sites and they do serve an intention where governments can just put blanket statements across everything. I think across the parliament and media over the last couple of years have been extremely volatile towards young people. And there's only 300 children that experience this type of incarceration. And there's thousands of adults who can do better and serve these children in better ways. And we must be the reasons for building safe communities. We must be intending to build safe communities and be conscious of these young people's lives, especially young Murri kids. We've got to know our families are not always who raise us, like our mums and dads are not always who raise us. I unfortunately raised 3 kids myself, and I haven't even birthed a child yet. And these are the dynamics in which a young person engages with. It's something that I hear the solicitors at Kilroy and Callaghan ask constantly of a 14-year-old girl just yesterday. And how many babies do you take care of? Oh, you take care of 10-year-old brother, you take care of 8-year-old sister, you take care of 3-year-old baby brother. And that's quite remarkable for a young woman who's just turned 14. So these are the things that we've got to be really conscious of. And if we can understand how the nuclear family is not a commonality across any community, black, white, or brindle, living in poverty means relying on a community. And we talked about that when referring to burnout. So why can't we presume that with the people that we're working with, naturally being at all of the levels of stress that they have to go through, they're going to be misunderstood in many of those spaces. So we have to be that everlasting understanding ear and sounding board for these people, and we must be advocating for them in an individual way. We've just gone through a organisation workshop where we had to teach new employees how to write support letters. I think that's one of the really clear way that we can advocate, not only to courts, but to like literally whatever service a person is forced to engage with. Our support letters are really great ways that we can alter the frames in which we think and operate within. And when we are writing really in-depth, wholesome letters that provide humanness and outline the varieties of skills and like skills that would be in a professional context, work-related skills, they're often implemented in their own family dynamics. Like we are really grateful here at Sisters to have a really amazing receptionist who has recently, well, is formally incarcerated, and she is a clear line from us to the women inside in prison. And it's really great that these women and girls are getting this wraparound intensive support. They know who's in this organisation. They know what we can do. They know what we will do. And they know that we'll smash whatever frame that they are in that keeps them in a cage. So we have to be able to be those voices. And we do that by knowing our people and building those relationships, and we can put that into practice with our support letters, with being there at those bail watch house counters with that young person. We have to be the ones to know their families as well. And the beautiful thing about First Nations people is that we have very common last names. Facebook is really great, where don't be ashamed of or afraid of being ambitious and creative with how you support these young people. That's the one thing that we're like Nettery is constantly questioning me on. She's like, is there a more creative way for you to be able to succeed and actually achieve this young person coming to the course today? Oh, she's being really moody. It's Monday. It's rainy. You need to be creative. What are you going to do in order to encourage this young person to come out the house and engage with us today? And that's what we have to be doing.
Right. Thanks, Ruby. Just thinking whether we should have a quick break. If people are wanting to quickly stretch their legs, grab a cuppa, go to the toilet, maybe a couple of minutes, not long. And we come back and I guess, for the next part, look at what have we learned and are these transferable to our workplaces and our lives generally? What can we do about this information? So 11:17, we'll be back. We start 11:20. Thank you. Jen, do you reckon we stay in one or yeah? Haven't got your voice.
We could get people to just like take a minute and write down one thing that they think they could do and one challenge.
Sure. Do you want to take that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that might then prompt people to talk.
Yep. Right. Are people back and not got their cameras on, or are you not back? If you're back, can you put your cameras back on so we can know you're there? Thank you. No, genuinely, people are not there. Might wait another minute or two.
I think that's everyone who had cameras on.
Yep.
Thanks, Hayley. Yeah, yeah. So shall we start back?
Yep. Let's
So thinking about how can we implement this? You know, what do we learn and how can we implement it? Because it's always good to, it's nice to listen to people talking and being inspiring, but it's even better when we can actually put it in practice. And so do you want to maybe just take 5 minutes, literally like a couple of minutes, you know, and just write down one thing from all of this that you think you could do you could actually implement in your workplace, you know, or have a crack at implementing in your workplace, and then just like bat it back and go, well, you know, what's a challenge, you know, what might be challenging in implementing that, so we can kind of talk through those challenges. Yeah, so just take a couple of minutes, just top of your head kind of thing. Yeah, have a chat with each other if there's a couple of people in the room, you know, like, yeah. All right, if we had a bit of a think, got something to share. So we were thinking of talking in the big group. Is that just because we're not such a big group, you know, that we probably can talk in a big group? Yeah, is that rather than go into breakout rooms, which, you know, everyone hates? Yeah. All right. So what are some of the ideas that you've had about things that you could implement? Does anyone want to share some of the things that you think you could do and what might be a challenge. This is the delusional space, the drinking space.
To pick up a parcel?
It went last Friday.
It went last Friday.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, no worries. It must be an glitch on the system.
Cool.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
We can go here.
Yeah, good on you.
So we were kind of talking about, personally for me, that one of the things that stood out the most was the comment on encouraging other professionals to question their own practice. And that, I think, was just the forefront on my mind and just kind of sat there whether I wanted it to or not. I suppose the challenge in that is not creating a space where, you know, your co-workers could feel attacked or, you know, judged or anything along those lines, as, you know, we've kind of discussed that being part of a team is such an important factor. So you don't want to kind of jeopardize that, but also, but also wanting to, personally, I'd want to get that feedback on my own, because I think that helps improve our own practice. But, you know, just walking that really gentle line of not crossing a line or insulting anybody, or, you know, questioning something that you might not have all the information to, but also challenging them to keep them on the ball as well.
Yeah.
Ruby, have you got any thoughts around that for, you know, how do you be the person in the room who's doing the challenging and holding people to account, you know, to a higher purpose, but not be, oh, that's just Jess banging on again, you know, like that kind of, you know, you get dismissed, don't you? Yeah.
I'm still learning how to navigate this tricky one, and I take a lot of cues and a lot of tips. I'm really lucky that I get to follow people like Deb Kilroy around and into some really peculiar places. I mean, at the start of the year for the End Toxic Prisons campaign, we met with Shane Knuth and the Catter Party, of all people, to help stop these prisons from being built, which is you know, that you're forced to engage with people who are going to challenge your views, and they're going to be guardians and gatekeepers of the institutions and the sectors we work within. And naturally, we all have that lived experience, and we all have a perspective that is and should be valued. And we understand that as humans, we come from many diverse backgrounds. And it's like you said, that you have to bring that, be really polite and walk a gentle line. And one thing I took from Deb in the early piece was just being able to remain in the frame. We're not here, like, as abolitionists, we're constantly questioning ourselves and our practice and not being a dictator and a gatekeeper. So naturally, we have to do that when we engage with people who have differing opinions, and we have to keep within the frame. This is about building safe communities. I'm not a copper, you're not a copper. We don't know more than each other, but we must hear each other, and we must be determined to build a safe community, because that's the one thing, the one factor we care about. And we believe that everybody deserves humanness, and we must understand the sectors and the mechanisms that we're able to implement within our work practice. In reflection of the Knuth meeting, we spent 40 minutes talking about football. Like, the first 40 minutes before we even got into the crux of things were, because Knuth he played football with my father when they both went to James Cook University in Townsville. And he was also a big fan of Smoking Joe Kilroy, who's Deb's husband. So there was this weird, I think the biggest thing is never assume that there's not something that you can relate on. And you have to bring that relation into whatever work and advocacy that you're doing. It goes for you and the young person, you and the family, as well as you and your enemy, for want of a better thing. They all have a purpose. We all have a purpose, and we all can contribute to building safe communities. And in fact, it's instrumental to build safe communities, and to be able to walk alongside with somebody who you despise and might not understand. I think that's been something, outside of the End Toxic Prisons campaign has just taught me this, and it's something I don't have patience for. I mean, I got put up to go and sit on a QCOS round table, and I walked away from it after our morning session had ended, because I was that young girl. I'm a young little black thing. I'm really petite and tiny, and sometimes my voice wavers in those kinds of settings. I didn't have Deb and Murri with me that day, so they're pretty good at leaving me alone, which speaks to their confidence in me. But my ability to advocate in those kinds of rooms are automatically, like, I'm assumed that I'm just being another little black voice who's just a little angry black woman who knows nothing and is yet to learn anything. And that's really disheartening to experience. And, you know, it did make me not come back and return for an afternoon session. However, it's important that I return back to those spaces and those places, because eventually somebody will get the light switch moment and we'll find some common ground, and we'll be able to actually build the communities that we want our children to be raised in and be beneficiaries of. That's the most important thing, is we all have to be beneficiaries of whatever good is being done in community. And you know, that goes for people like the Libs, and that goes for people like the Katter Party, and it goes for people like youth workers within prisons. And it's an everlasting challenge. It never ends. But if we can find common ground and something to relate on and something to build upon, and I think we see that quite often, especially with like Jonathan Thurston's foundation receiving a large bit of money for like to engage with youth. But if he actually understood, he might not actually realize that he's able to engage with the youth who get incarcerated, because they're actually incarcerated. They're not just troubled kids in school. They're actually young kids that we cannot see. So it's really important that when we are engaging with other workplaces, that we're remembering that there are kids we cannot see. And those kids that we cannot see must be the kids that we bring along with us. Once we advocate for the most disadvantaged, everybody else rises up. It's like we're pulling everyone up from the bootstraps. If we can pick that kid up who doesn't have any shoelaces to tie his shoes, then everyone's going to be walking around in flash kicks eventually, hopefully, ideally. But yeah, I guess that's one thing. We just have to remember that we all got that passion, and we all want that safe community, and we must never remove ourselves or that frame from the conversation. It must be at the forefront, and it must be our infrastructure. Is that we're only here, I don't give a F who you vote for on election day, but if we're here to talk about this young person's life, we've got to be beneficiaries, and they got to be beneficiaries of whatever good comes from that.
Mm-hmm.
If I can just add on to what Ruby was saying, it is like challenging injustice or wrongdoing in any context it's a struggle. And I guess it's just there is also something about looking after ourselves. And so with people, Ruby was saying, like, you know, Nettery or Deb Kilroy, there is a good network of people there to definitely support and debrief. So because you come sometimes out of, like, you know, a session where you're challenging power and you feel flat because it's like, you know, you've given a lot of energy and you're the one in a large group, and it could feel like, you know, quite I guess quite a lot of pressure, but you need people, like-minded people, that you sit and you talk and support one another, so that you're here in this for a long term, not sort of, as people said, burning out and walking away from it.
Mm.
Jen, you're mute.
Anyone else write something down?
I'm happy to go next.
Yeah, thanks.
So, of course, like the big thing I reflected on was the everyday abolition, but because I've already talked about that, I'll talk about something else. So the other thing that I have been thinking about it before, but this has really kind of solidified that. It's just that being a deadly ally and removing self from colonial practice. So I guess at Clarence Street, like, it's really great that we have a youth worker and then a family support worker. So that means, you know, we can be an advocate for the person we're supporting. But what I'm noticing as working with young people at risk and or engaged with the youth justice space, which means the overrepresentation of Indigenous young people, I have a caseload that's over half young people who identify as Aboriginal. And that idea of trying to work just with the young person and not, you know, hold space for the family has been something that I've found being kind of difficult, and I'm trying to advocate with the family support worker and that it's okay actually if mum asks me to come have a sit down and talk about what's going on for her. You know, I can be a part of that conversation and then reflect that back to the family support worker who can have more conversations with mum. But, you know, that community and that family is so important in these, you know, with these young people that, you know, we have to remove that colonial practice that we have here of it must be separate family and young person. So that's what I'm thinking. It could be a challenge, of course, going against a colonial, load, but that's okay. I hope to keep advocating for it.
It's great, Sophie. I don't know, Sophie, whether you've come across, we've got at Yank, we've got the definition of youth work, and then there's a Murri definition of youth work. And it's very much one of the subtleties in that is what you're talking about is very much a Murri definition of youth work. It's included in that of how, like, you work with family, community, kin, not just the young person as separate.
And I love that you've made that contribution. It's such an inevitable part of our practice here at Sisters. It's our day-to-day life. It's something that we've had to, which is why when I've said before when I mentioned that our Yanga program is so effective that we actually have to push our older women along to like whatever independence that they want, but they often trickle back because we have so many. We have a Tuesday meeting where we talk about organisation structure, but we also talk about inclusive support, and that's because we support many generations of a family, and unfortunately, that's what it takes to actually build abolition and safe communities. It doesn't end with one generation or the one child or mum. It involves us working with their grandkids. It involves us working alongside anybody in that family's life who is an independent structure and support structure for that person and that family dynamic. And it's important that we have inclusive support models in whatever workplace we work in, because it's a way that we can prevent burnout for our own selves. It's a way that we build better communities and better relationships with everybody that we walk alongside, and it just brings a lot of humanness to our practice. And it's so important. It's great that you're doing that work. I know that young person and that mother would be very, very happy with what you're doing.
Thanks.
Anyone else want to share the things that you've been reflecting on during the morning?
I was just thinking of something that could be a bit cheeky, but like, you know, some of those meetings that, like, you know, Ruby mentioned, like going to one of those consultations, big meetings with QCOS and stuff like that, of actually doing an audit of everything that it said, actions and stuff, sitting there quietly and just writing down how is this like, you know, acknowledging Aboriginal culture? How is this respectful of knowledge of elders and past and present, and actually writing some of that down? So again, coming back to that sort of a thing of what is it we mean when we talk about that we respect culture and we actually bring it into our work practice? So how do we actually bring some of those sort of things? So it could be done quietly, but just some sort of a thing that could be a fun thing at the same time.
Mm. Mm.
Anyone else? Anything? Any reflections? Anything? No? I guess we can end a bit early. Well, coming to an end, I guess I'd like to really thank Ruby for giving us your time, sharing your knowledge. It's been great having you on board. Really appreciate that. Thank you, as always. Thank you, Jen, for your support. Really appreciate your support as well. And everybody else, your contribution, giving the time to come and sit and be with us, sharing. It's really important for us to keep this community going. It's this opportunity for us as youth workers to work in a community of learning and learn from one another and keep that sort of a knowledge sharing and knowledge building as integral part of our professional development. It's really important. I'm really thankful that you're taking it seriously and you actually take away time, which I know all of you would be stressed in terms of service delivery, all the other things, pressures that are on you, but to actually see the importance of actually doing things like this one, coming together and learning together. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day. And the next session is we got on 22nd of July, I think it's, or 23rd. You've probably seen posters. I'll send more info out. We got a couple of researchers from University of Western Sydney who've been sort of researching projects around young people's participation, I think it is. So where sort of like, you know, what actually really works and what are the some more sort of tokenistic things again, and from also perspective of young people themselves. So it's an interesting, going to be interesting discussion. So yeah, thanks again. Have a great rest of the day and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eva.